Hello, welcome back to the Leading Yourself podcast. Today, I am delighted to have Scott Miller back in the podcast. You have been my most recurrent guest, Scott, and I'm so honored to have you back here on the podcast.
Carolina, I'm honored you invited me back. Thank you for lending me your platform and turning your spotlight onto me. I appreciate the support and the confidence.
Yes, I'm thrilled for you to be here, especially because the reason why you are back in the podcast is because you're launching a new book. Last time you were here, or the first time that you were on the podcast, we talk about your book, Management Mass to Leadership Success. And there's a new book in this series of Messes to Successes. And today we're talking about Marketing Mass to Brand Success. And I am excited to talk to you about this book. I want to start by saying that I'm not a marketing professional. I don't have marketing anywhere on my title, but I'm almost through the book and I could relate so much with it. And I'm looking forward to talk to you through the messages in here. And I love that it says Marketing Mass to Brand Success, 30 Challenges to Transform Your Organization's Brand and Your Own. Let's talk a little bit about that. Who is the target audience for this new book, Scott?
Well, so one of the chapters in the book is titled Your Smallest Viable Market, right? It's a concept that my friend Seth Godin, who many of your listeners and viewers know, of course, as the eminent marketer and leadership expert, talked about how many marketers will try to boil the ocean, right? Who should buy your product? Everybody. Who should read your book? Well, my book is for everybody. But the fact of the matter is, it's not true. That it's counterintuitive as marketers to think about your largest viable market versus your smallest viable market. So to answer your question, I think if I had to pick like the single profile of who should read this book, it's probably people who own marketing inside of a company. Perhaps you're just graduating from college with a marketing degree, or you're perhaps a product manager or channel manager, or maybe you are a marketing manager or a social media manager. So I think someone who has the functional hat of marketing is my primary audience. But as you and I know from other conversations, everybody is in sales and everybody is in marketing. Not everybody is in finance, not everybody is in operations, not everybody is in IT, but everybody is in sales, whether you're aware of it or not, and everybody is in marketing, whether you're marketing your career, your skills, your ideas, you're all in marketing. So I would argue, as much as I teach the concept of smallest viable marketing, I think if anybody is in the process of persuading, influencing, convincing, listening to someone else, then you're in marketing. And I think the book could be really helpful for you to build your own brand and to market yourself, whether it be internally in your own career, or perhaps looking for a new career, or just building your brand as a contributor in society. I think the book can be valuable to you.
Absolutely. I told you I'm almost through the entire book. And as I was reading, a lot of things resonated with me that I'm like, oh my God, like this applies to me in my job in HR, but applies as well to me in building my own personal brand.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, as you said, we are all in sales, whether we're selling a service, whether we're selling a product, whether we're selling our skills, whether whatever that is. And I think you touch on the book on a lot of things that anyone can relate. And I think is written in a way that you don't have to be in marketing or a
Great.
marketing professional
Good.
to
Good.
understand the
Good.
concepts, which
Good.
I
Mission accomplished
absolutely
then.
love.
Thank you. Great to hear.
Let me tell you an anecdote. When I was at school, the thought crossed my mind on getting a major in marketing. I thought, okay, once I graduate, I'll get an MBA with a major in marketing, and that's where I want to be. And I ended in HR. But when I was reading your book, I'm like, I'm actually in marketing in some sense every day, whether it is, selling my ideas to someone, marketing, to candidates, the company.
That's right.
One of the challenges in your book, number 2, says marketing is not just a division or a function, but it's everyone's role. Can you talk a little bit on your perspective on this?
Sure. I was once at a conference. Yeah, as you know, I used to be the chief marketing officer for the Franklin Covey Company, global public company. I was an officer in the firm, and I almost doubled the annual tenure of a CMO. And I was at a CMO conference, Carolina, and the person said that the CMO is really the CRO, the chief recruitment officer, because your job is to build a brand where people want to come and stay, right? To recruit and re-recruit. And I'd argue that even in your role in HR, you're also the chief recruitment officer, right? Because you're also building a culture where people choose to come and stay because they're respected and loved and developed and nurtured and feel valued. So I think this book can be used in any number of ways, especially to recognize that just because your title doesn't say marketing in it, you are a brand ambassador for your organization, whether you are in HR or finance and operations and supply chain, whether you're in the Taipei office or the Berlin office or the Michigan office, that everybody is in marketing. Everybody owns the brand on and off the job. Your social media, your interactions at trade shows, at the bar, after the trade show at the conference, right? If everybody from, Disney is sloshed at the bar and people know that that's Disney, like, what's up with Disney, right? You get the point, is that everybody is in marketing an organization and everyone should take that seriously. You are a brand ambassador for your company, whether you want to be or not. And the company should take that seriously and educate everybody, right? And not just beyond social media policies or the employee handbook, that we should take time to communicate to everybody the gravitas of their decisions and their actions. And if you work here at XYZ company, here's what we expect out of you kind of on and off the job. That doesn't mean that you can't bring your whole self to work. We don't have an opinion on how you live your personal life, as long as it's ethical and legal, right? Your values are your own. But everybody needs to own the brand and recognize that in every interaction, they are a model of their company. For example, at Franklin Covey, we're a productivity company. We're a leadership firm, right? You can't be late to meetings. You can't show up to conference calls not organized. People expect a higher standard for us. Whether you're teaching our content or not, you need to be living our content as role models. So you get the point. Everybody is in marketing regardless of your title.
Yeah, such a good point. There was a challenge in the book, one that resonated with me too. I mean, these are all the ones that resonated with me. I have these little cards that you send me, and probably, you can see I have more than half of the cards here, so we can be talking for hours, but I'm going to pick just a few, right?
Okay.
One thing that I think is a paradigm shift or a perspective shift for many professionals in many areas, but maybe we can start talking about specifically in the marketing field, is this stay close to the cash.
Yes.
You know that we all think, I own the function, and the business leader is the one that drives the P&L. But in your book, and this resonated with me a lot, because in HR, we fall in the same trap of thinking, we own hiring and onboarding and all these different processes. But at the end of the day, we all need to think in how are we adding value back to that bottom line of the business? Because if you're working on a company, or even worse, if you have your own business, you need to drive that profitability, right? So can you speak a little bit on how this, from your experience in marketing, how is this paradigm shift? And maybe then you can expand beyond marketing in general for any career.
Sure. Well, to your point, I actually think a lot of these challenges are about building your career inside and outside of a marketing career. All of my books in the Mess to Success series follow the same formula, right? 30 challenges, 30 chapters, sort of a 30-day schedule to read them in. They're all very quick, easy breezy books. I don't write big, heavy intellectual books. I write I hope, funny, entertaining, practical books. But this is the third challenge. challenge called Stay Close to the Cash. And it really is just generally good career advice is you want to make sure that you're not hiding in marketing. You're not hiding in human resources. You're not hiding in a part of the company where you're not responsible for revenue or profitability. Because the people who are the furthest from the cash are the ones that get downsized, eliminated. Think about it. When tough times come, be it a pandemic or a global setback or an acquisition or just a general cost-cutting initiative, the people who are viewed as the least relevant to either acquiring revenue or profitability or minimizing costs, they're going to be exposed. This is just a cold hard fact. And so whatever role you're in, you need to be able to articulate how you help to drive revenue and profitability, how you help to increase the acquisition of new customers or maintain current customers, or on the other side, how you are reducing costs or how you're increasing profitability through efficiencies. Stay close to the cash. I share, I think, in the book in this chapter, a horrifying fact, and that is, you're rarely in the meeting when your career is decided for you. It's always happening with people above you. And if you want to lead your career deliberately and not leave it to accidental chance, you want to make sure that you can articulate how you drive the company's business model. I teach a whole chapter about building your business acumen. You need to know what are the levers in the company, right? There's 5 parts of every business: margin, cash, velocity, customers, and growth. I'll repeat it: margin, cash, velocity, customers, and growth. And you need to be able to articulate where you are close to any of those if it's not just cash. If you want to build a great career, want to inoculate yourself against perhaps a downsizing. You can't always completely prevent that, but you'll make sure that when people are thinking, when your boss is thinking, I've got to cut 3 positions, I would never touch Carolina because Carolina is the person out recruiting all of our salespeople, or I would never touch Carolina because she runs our orientation or our onboarding process, and we couldn't possibly live without that. Always stay close to the cash, even if you're not involved in cash. You might be the receptionist. You might be the, part of the cleaning crew, but make sure you can articulate why your role is necessary and how it increases the company's business model.
Yeah.
Sorry, long answer to your question, but I'm quite passionate about this as a piece of career advice, regardless of whether you're in marketing or not.
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's a paradigm shift because when you're working on a specific function, you look at the processes in that function, the deliverables in that function. But I think anything that we do ties back to either adding cost, adding value,
right,
supporting the revenue generation
right,
or the profitability, right? And being able to draw that line of sight of anything that you do, or even a step further, how do you when you start a project, for example, how can you're able to articulate the return of the investment, right? When you're asking for resources to work on something, how can you articulate that return of investment is key, especially, in times like now that companies are being challenged and resources are limited. You can increase your chances of getting resources to drive your projects if you're able to articulate how is that generating a return of investment to the company.
Carolina, beautifully said. I wrote this chapter because I think there are a fair number of people in marketing, which, by the way, could be said for operations, public relations, innovations, that are scared of sales. They see it as dirty, or they see it as beneath them, or they don't view it as something they can do, right? So they hide in marketing, they hide in operations. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should be in sales. Of course, that's lunacy. But I was speaking to marketers to say, did you pick a career in marketing because you were threatened or intimidated by sales? You didn't want to be responsible for a revenue number. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know about your company, but wherever I've worked, it's the salespeople who are funding the salaries of marketing and IT and operations. Sales, I don't know when the last time operations had a revenue goal or marketing had a revenue goal other than to support sales. So I just wanted to evangelize, not humiliate, not diminish, but just evangelize no matter what role you're in. To your point, make sure you can articulate how you are driving the company's profitability, and you will more likely insulate yourself from a future disruption or even elimination than if you just left it to chance.
Yeah. Another challenge, 14, it says, be willing to change your mind. How does this fit in the marketing world?
Well, again, this, you picked another one that's ubiquitous, right? Is I think I've really grown to better appreciate this. I used to think leaders, marketing, human resources, operations, sales, that changed their minds were poor leaders. They were weak leaders. They were too easily influenced. They didn't have a philosophy, right? Or a point of view or an ideology. So they kind of bounced around. You always see politicians being accused, pro-life or pro-choice, they move here and all the expediency. And then I came to realize, it's a little bit of a leadership competency to be able to be open to influence, to recognize that you might have, to quote you, an old paradigm or an old mindset. And it's some of the best leadership when we see leaders being open to be influenced, open to change their mind, open to publicly say, I used to think this. And I've met deeply with Carolina about this, and she really has changed my point of view based on her facts, on her passion, on her experience, on her data. And so I think regardless of what role you're in, including if you're a parent or a spouse, how entrenched are you in your mindsets? You cannot change your values and still change your mind. You can be opposed to someone else's lifestyle based on perhaps on your own, religious views or your politics, and still be kind to them and support them and love them and help them. Same in an organization. It's the agile thinker. It's the person who's emotionally nimble that is going to, conquer the workplace in the next 20 years. It's okay. I thought this was going to happen, and now that's going to happen. I loved this idea, and sales didn't love this idea, so I'm back to the drawing board, right? I wrote the chapter just to talk about the importance, the vitality of being able to be agile and nimble and flexible, and not go down with the ship, right? Not die on your sword. Don't ever again say, I'm going to go down with the ship on this one. Seriously? Like, really? I've had lots of ideas that are built out marketing campaigns where I was convinced it was a winner. And I took it to the CEO and it's like, yeah, I'm not getting it. Go back to the drawing board. And I'm thinking, I'm going to strangle you. What I'm saying is, no problem. Can you be particular about what you like and don't like? And I'm thinking, holy crap, how am I going to pull this out, right? But it's why I kept my job, because I was seen as being agile and nimble and flexible. Now, there were occasions when I said, you know what? I disagree. Can I tell you why I see it differently? Now, I would use that very carefully, right? It wasn't my default strategy. But there is, I think, a leadership competency and, being willing to change your mind. And it goes beyond marketing, goes beyond being professional, goes beyond your role in every area of your life. Can you change your mind about someone else? Right? Carolina might think I'm a jerk.
Never.
Am I going to be a jerk for the rest of my life in every situation? Is there anything I can do to get Carolina to change her mind about me? So it's just about being flexible and open to influence.
Yeah. On that note, I was listening to you, I remind this other chapter that talks about more is not better, better is better. Because when you think about changing your mind and going back to the drawing board, a lot of times, I know this is very typical in marketing of there's a lot of creative people in marketing, right? Where we want to be in brainstorming mode and create a lot of ideas. And when your idea is challenged, typically our mind goes to, we need more ideas, right? But so I want to talk a little bit about this. More is not better, but better is better.
Again, I love the fact that you pick the ones that are fairly ubiquitous, right? They work well in marketing, but they're resonant, I hope, with your audience, regardless of what role your listeners are in, which is broad, given the increasing popularity of your podcast. This is challenge 13, right? This is more is not better, better is better, right? This is just the axiom of quality over quantity. And I'll tell you, of all of these 30 challenges, Carolina, this is the one I struggle the most with. I am a poor model of this. So I don't want to seem like a hypocrite because I struggle with this, right? Right now, I'm launching 3 books in the next 14 months. I'm writing 3 new books in the next 14 months. I host the world's largest podcast for leadership. I'm launching a new podcast. I'm hosting bookclub.com. I write an article for Inc. magazine weekly. I'm a father to 3 boys and a husband, and I have a role at my church, and my parents are, 8. I mean, I have like, seriously, Miller? Seriously? Are you crazy? And so as a result of it, in a moment of transparency, I don't think I give my readers, my viewers, my followers, my listeners, perhaps my best quality, because there's something in me that is making me want to do more and more and more, right? Whether it's validation or love or admiration or whatever it is. I don't want to, have you deeply psychoanalyze me because you have some quality in that, but or some competence there. But you get the big point, right? Is more is not better, better is better. What is going to define those voices that are heard and followed and influential is the quality of their work. I'm a big fan of a man named Brendon Burchard. He's a friend of mine, and he's a prolific author and speaker. He's the world's largest online trainer, and we become friends. And he wrote a book recently called High Performance Habits.
An amazing book.
It's an amazing book. He spent 3 years writing it.
It is a must read.
It is High Performance Habits, and he spent $1 million on the research behind the book. And in one of the chapters, he shares this concept. This is not my concept, so your listeners and viewers should check in. In his book, he shares a concept called PQO. PQO. It's called prolific quality output. And he shares a very vulnerable story around how when he left his consulting company, I think it was Accenture or McKinsey, whatever it was, and launched his own business, he was all over the place, right? Kind of like I am in the infancy of my business, writing and speaking and podcasting and designing and training, and wasn't getting any traction a year in. A lot of activity, not a lot of results. And so he really, really reoriented himself to deciding what is the highest quality output. Well, if I want to be the world's largest online trainer, and I want to be one of the world's biggest and most popular speakers, I've got to have content. I've got to have the best quality books. So he really reoriented all of his flurry of passions and activities into writing the best books possible, which is why his books are #1 New York Times, #1 Wall Street Journal, #1 USA Today. He issues a book now every 3 or 4 years versus Scott Miller, who's issuing 3 books in 1 year. Now, in my vulnerability, I hope your audience doesn't think my books are trash and doesn't buy them, but I want your audience to know I'm very mindful of how hard this is for me. And I'm doing some introspection on, what hole in my life am I trying to serve by focusing on more is more versus better is better, right? Or not more is better. You get the point. So I think there's a nugget here for everyone to think about: relationships, your brand, your recipes, your profile, your projects at work, right? Your committees you're on. In almost every case, better is better, more is not better.
Yeah. To your defense, I would say I've read so far 2 of your books, and they have been amazing books, and they're worth reading, and they're full of fun, but also amazing content. I know that you had this big opportunity to interact with so amazing leaders, and you've really captured the things that have resonated with you, what you've learned, what you're applied, but also you talk about your own experience and your own vulnerability, which I think it's not commonly seen, but also at the same time, the way you structure this week, at least this series, right? With the 30 challenges, they're
Yeah.
so easy to read.
Thank you.
And so
I'm emotional right now. I'm honestly, I value our friendship, and I'm grateful for your support, Carolina. I appreciate you being my champion. I mean that very sincerely. I'm emotional listening to you. I might cry.
Okay,
I'll be your first guest ever to cry in your podcast.
That would be epic. I could say that I was the first one that made you cry.
Made you cry. You know, I mean that genuinely to your listeners and viewers. There is no greater compliment when you get a Facebook message or a LinkedIn in-mail and someone chooses not to share it publicly, but they email you or in-mail you and say, I want you to know on page 17 of this book or whatever, this really spoke to me. And thank you for telling your story. Thank you for your vulnerability. And it validates you, right? You think, you know what? The book may not have made it on the New York Times #1 or #10, but this person over in Michigan or in Singapore, right? Or wherever, it improved their life. And you just did. Thank you for valuing my work. I mean it genuinely.
Okay, so as I said, I have so many cards. I can talk about so many things.
Okay, sorry.
I have one last question before we talk about your book and some of the things that I see on the background of the other books that you said you're writing right now. But for you, what is the chapter that was either the hardest to write or the one that, like your baby, your favorite chapter in the book, and why?
Yeah, I think it's challenge 17. And it's called, by the way, this is the first person who's asked me this question. Challenge 17, hire people smarter than you. I think, I was a 25-year associate of the world's most prominent leadership development firm, Franklin Covey. I left 6 months ago in good standing. I'm still a consultant with an advisor. I still lead a team of people there, but as an outside consultant. And I still host their podcast and speak and write for them. But I'll tell you, it was Liz Wiseman's book, Multipliers, which I think is one of the best leadership books ever written. That actually was the motivation for me stepping down from being the chief marketing officer. Because as you may know from having read her book, she talks about you cannot be a multiplier of people until you understand where and when and how and why you are a diminisher of people. Because all of us are either, moving back and forth. You aren't a multiplier or a diminisher. We're all doing both. And one of her accidental diminishing profiles is the idea fountain. She calls it that. The person who's always, just what if we did this and what if we did that? And as a marketing guy, I got a lot of creativity, right? I have no shortage of ideas. And I started to realize that I was, in fact, what Liz calls the sometimes smartest person in the room. Right? There was a sad phrase at marketing that said, best idea wins as long as it's Scott's. And, that's funny, but it's also horrifying because, to quote Liz, I was the genius in the room. I wasn't the genius maker of others. Now, I think most people would tell you that, I was a great leader. They increased their skills and their compensation and their profile and all of that. I'm quite proud of my legacy there. But I read Liz's book and I realized that I was probably so insecure at times in my skill and my confidence that I was unwilling to hire people who were smarter than me, or at least who I perceived to be smarter. When in fact, I think it is a leader's top job to show the humility and the confidence to hire people who are noticeably, palpably smarter, more talented, more well-educated, more expert even than you are, and recognize that that is your job as a leader, is to be a magnet of talent. Whether you are the owner, the founder, the funder, the CEO, or whatever you are, your job is not to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is not to be the genius, but rather the genius maker. So in this chapter, I talk about, are you confident and vulnerable enough to not always be the smartest person in the room and to be a magnet for smarter people than you? Because as the leader, you see your job as the culture maker, right? As the bureaucratic red tape cutter. Your job is to ignite and inspire them and unleash their genius. And so that is, to your credit again, one of these messes that is beyond just marketing.
Yeah. It's funny, Scott, because if we were continuing this discussion and I were to pick another car, that was my next one that I was going to pick. So that worked out perfectly.
Good.
So,
I struggle with it, right? I mentioned in the book, these are challenges that I face. It isn't like I mastered all of these and I'm going to fix you. No, I mean, these are challenges, these are messes that I struggled with, and I'm hoping to teach the reader like me how to move from mess to success.
and it's a journey always with a lot of these things, right? It's not like you're going to end at a destination, and there's some of these things are an ongoing work in progress,
Right.
because there's so many moving parts around, right? Like culture changes over time, people changes over time. So they're always,
Yeah.
it's a journey.
Yeah. Well said.
So I want to be very respectful of your time, but I know this book has not launched yet. So I feel very privileged that I have a copy of it, an advanced copy of it. But tell us, when is this book going to be available?
Sure.
And how people can get the book?
Sure. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm authoring a whole series of books in the mess to success genre. The first book was Management Mess to Leadership Success, launched and became the #1 book on Amazon in its category for 6 solid weeks. On May 11th of 2021, the second in the series launches, called Marketing Mess to Brand Success. You can buy it right now on Amazon as a pre-order. You can buy it at Walmart, Target, all of the, you can pre-order it on any retailer right now. Releases on May 11th, and there'll be, I think, maybe 7 books in the Mess to Success series that follow this one.
What is going to be the next one after Marketing Mess to Brand Success?
So the third in the series, it launches in January of 2022. I just completed the manuscript. It's called Job Mess to Career Success. And this is all about the lessons that I've learned in my 35-year career, from literally the front line to the C-suite, how to intentionally build a deliberate career based on your values that works for you. So Job Mess to Career Success is third, launches in January 2022. The fourth one, which launches in the fall of 2022, which, back to our previous point, better is better, not more is better, is Communication Mess to Influence Success. This is all about kind of mastering your ability to influence others through verbal communication, written communication, your body language, your listening skills, right? How do you become a masterful communicator? Also by listening to influence other people. Communication Mess to Influence Success.
Awesome. I can't wait to read all of them. I have to say that those two sound really exciting, and they're not coming fast enough. So,
well, thank you. Thanks. There's more. There's going to be Sales Mess. There's Relationship Mess. There's Parenting Mess. There's a whole slew of them that I got to start working on.
I have to ask one last question. You mentioned, very in between other things that you mentioned, that you're launching a new podcast.
I am. Now I'm a total fraud to your audience, right? But like you, I'm privileged to host a leadership podcast. It's called On Leadership with Scott Miller, and it's become the largest podcast globally on the topic of leadership, only to probably be eclipsed by yours at some point. So I'll look forward to your being in your shadow. We just taped our 150th episode with Catherine Schwarzenegger Pratt on the topic of forgiveness. We have some great guests coming on, including Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and Jamie Kern-Leem and others. But I'm launching, I think in June, a new podcast for Franklin Covey. It's called Franklin Covey Presents C-Suite Conversations with Scott Miller. So every week we're going to invite a different C-suite, CMO, CEO, CFO, CIO, CTO, you name it, a different C-suite officer to come on to talk about their career journey, the strategies their companies are pursuing, what are they learning, what lessons have they learned. And each week will be a video and audio podcast with a different C-suite person from around the world. It's going to be a much more global podcast with people from all the continents around the world, different industries, not-for-profits, for-profits, Fortune 10, Inc. 5000. And so I'm excited about that. We'll tape our first episode in May, and it will launch likely sometime in June.
Awesome.
Which was going to completely negate any credibility I have with your listeners today about my chapter around more is not better. I'm embarrassed.
I can't wait to listen to that podcast. And
the reason why is because we had so like you, right? So many guests pitching us, and do I interview the chief learning officer from Ericsson, or do I interview Bill Gates? There's only 52 weeks in a year, and I can't podcast more than twice a week. So that's why we're doing it based on demand. We hope people will listen. We'll see.
I'm sure is going to be competing with the On Leadership podcast.
I'm competing against myself, right? That's the definition of fluency.
Well, there is a challenge in your book that says make friends with your competition. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a great chapter. In fact, I actually went out and met with the chief marketing officer of a rival of ours at Franklin Covey called Vital Smarts. You, of course, know them, right? They're behind the book Crucial Conversations. They're a clear competitor. And in fact, she writes half the chapter in my book to talk about gone are the days where your value proposition was demonizing your competition and trashing them, right? I mean, welcome to 1990. There's so much to learn from friending your competition in an abundant, transparent, authentic way that will only help you in your current role, but might help you find a future role as well. So I'm glad you pitched that one. That's actually good career advice.
Yeah,
well.
Absolutely. Okay, Scott, I know we have limited time. As I said, every time that I talk to you, I can be talking to you for hours, but I just want to say thank you for being here in the podcast again. For those that are listening, make sure that you pre-order the book. Since this podcast will be published before the launch date, make sure that you pre-order it. Whether you're a marketing professional or you're just interested in building your own brand, this is a great resource that can help you do just that. And with that, Scott, again, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to make this a personal goal that one day we will switch places and I will be in one of your podcasts. That would mean that either I wrote a really good book,
yes,
which I haven't even started, or I become a C-suite.
I think both are likely to happen. I think it's likely we're going to see you as an author fairly soon, and I may have some inside information on that I won't share here on the podcast. And I'll bet it's highly likely that if you choose to, and it was right for you and your family, that you're likely to be in the C-suite sooner than you know it. So stand by for more details to Carolina's listeners and viewers.
Once again, thank you very much, Scott. It's such a pleasure to have you here in the podcast.
My honor. Thank you for your friendship.